Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever the case may be. This is Mike, and this is Mike Dell's World number 400. And today is the day before International Podcast Day. It's Sunday, the 29th of September, 2024. So I figured I'd get out ahead of the International Podcast Day. I guess it's probably the 30th someplace in the world. That's cool. But figured I would just kind of go over a little bit of my history in podcasting. Those of you who've been with me forever. And I have some listeners that have been listening since the get-go or pretty close, which was in April of 2005. I was living in Lake Ann, Michigan. That's a little town a few miles west of here. And I'm in Traverse City, in case you guys didn't know that. In the pinky finger of Michigan. Everybody in Michigan points to the back of their left hand, at least if they don't live in the UP. And right there in the pinky finger area, I guess. Nobody calls it that, but that's what I call it. But over in Lake Ann, we'll go back a little bit further. Back in the early 2000s, I got really interested in talk radio because I was up at all hours of the night working night shift at a printing plant. And, talk radio, people like Art Bell and, Jim Bohannon and Larry King and Bruce Williams, Sally Jesse Raphael, the old NBC TalkNet, and, of course, I like Paul Harvey. But, in the middle of the night, there really wasn't a lot of different shows to listen to, so it was mostly Art Bell. And then I would catch Jim Bohannon or Larry King, before Art Bell. And I discovered this thing called an iPod. And back when the iPod first came out, I thought, oh, this is great. I can put stuff on here. So, what stuff? There wasn't much to put on there other than music. And, when you're working night shift, music's kind of boring, put you to sleep. So, Bruce Williams was the first I knew of that would put MP3 files on their website that you could download. So I would download those MP3 files from 3 hours of Bruce Williams and then, found a couple other sites that would do that. And before too long, I filled up my little iPod. In fact, I have the iPod that I used over in that other desk behind me. One of those iPod shuffles. It looked like a stick of gum, kind of that shape. And I think I could put 512 megabytes of MP3s on there. And, back then we didn't encode them as high as we do now. And that was plenty. It'd get me through an 8-hour shift. And I wouldn't even have to worry about the AM radio. Listening to Art Bell when they turned the power down. And you could, I had to have the radio at just a certain spot and crank it up. And this was a lot easier. I could listen in earbuds, wired earbuds. And then I heard about this thing called podcasting, and I would listen to Twit, of course. They were one of the first ones. Listen to Adam Curry, the Daily Source Code. That one was pretty popular. And back then there was maybe 100 podcasters, something like that. Listen to Todd and Geek News Central. He was one of the first ones that I listened to, and there was just all kinds of stuff, out of that 100 that was worth listening to. And definitely got into it. And, I always wanted to have my own radio show. I didn't really have a lot to talk about. I still don't. But I always wanted to do it, just for the sake of doing it. And this was kind of the way to do it. So, again, April 2005, I just bought a Dell laptop, a little 12-inch Windows machine, and came with a little stick microphone. I said, well, geez, how hard is this podcasting thing to do? And back then it was a bit harder. I had to hand roll the RSS feed. That took me a little while to figure it out. And, I was hand rolling a website. And, basically, truth be told, I stole Adam's feed and just changed stuff around for my stuff and put it on the server, and away it went. And so that's how I started. And it was this show. It was named differently. It was called the Benzoid Report. And the reason for that was I lived in Benzie County, Michigan, and some of the people out there called themselves Benzoids. It's the smallest county in Michigan, and I don't think it's the least populated, but it's not very populated even now, and I think they only have one working traffic light in the whole county. So it's mostly woods and Lake Michigan shoreline and, little cute little towns and whatnot, Lake Can being one of them. And so I thought that would be cool. Benzoid Report. I didn't know a benzoid was a class of drugs, so that probably slowed me down a little bit or got listeners in there that, well, what's this all about? And, wasn't really about anything. Still isn't. And that's kind of what I like about it. I've done lots of other podcasts, and I'll go through kind of a list of that here in a little bit. I do have some guidelines here so I don't forget anything. But about the first 36 episodes, 37 episodes of the Benzoid Report are lost in the bit bucket somewhere. They always say that you put something on the internet and it's here forever. Well, that's not exactly true. I cannot find the first 36 episodes that I did. Nowhere online, no mention of it online anywhere, but I know I did them. And truth be told, it's probably on a hard drive somewhere in my garage in a bin full of old hard drives. So some point I'll get set up to where I can search some hard drives and see if I can't find those. It would be cool to listen to how crappy that first episode was. Again, I was sitting on my front porch outside in the woods, and a stick microphone and the laptop, and yeah, I'm sure it was just wonderful. But flash forward to September of 2008, I decided that the Benzoid Report was probably not the right name for the podcast, and switched it over to Mike Dell's World with episode 93. So technically, subtract 92 episodes, and that's my true count of Mike Dell's World, but we're splitting hairs here. And I've done a lot of unnumbered episodes. For a while there was some technology that you could actually literally phone it in. You dial a phone number and talk into the phone, and then when you hung up, it created a podcast episode and put it out. So I did a lot of those episodes. Done, I've podcasted a lot of places. I've podcasted walking down the strip in Las Vegas. I've podcasted, taking a walk around my neighborhood. One of my favorite episodes, and I forgot what number it is. It's still online, but it's called Walking with the White Squirrels. I don't know why that's my favorite. It just always was, and I've replayed it probably 2 times since. It's the neighborhood I live in, all nice and woods, and behind my house there was a family of white squirrels. And I haven't seen any in several years now, but there were I guess they're albino squirrels, and I guess they don't last in the wild just because they're easy to see. But used to, take a walk back there, and I'd see 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, and now I don't see them anymore. So, I guess, but walking and talking, people look at you funny. Nowadays they don't, because, everybody's got Bluetooth and talking on their phones all the time. You can walk around like a crazy person and nobody would care. And, a lot of people walk around with cameras in their face. I just, not quite my thing. Because of my podcast, I have the full-time employment that I have now. I went to a conference in 2007 out in California, and by chance, ran into the Ravois team out there, Barry and Todd and Brian, Angelo. I don't remember who else was there, but I hit it off with them apparently, because a couple of years later I went part-time with them. Everybody was part-time back then. So in 2009, started part-time at Blueberry doing tech support, helping them with they just come out with a PowerPress plugin for WordPress, and just started hosting shows. Before that, we weren't doing any hosting. It was all advertising. And we pivoted. If you want to hear the whole story about that, the episode of Podcast Insider that came out last Thursday is some of the people who've been around Raw Voice and Blueberry all the time. We kind of went through the history of that, and celebrating 20 years of podcasting. He said nearly 20 years of me podcasting in April. That'll be 20. Todd, I think, just went over 20 years. So interesting stuff. But I went with Blueberry part-time in 2009, and been kind of living the living the dream, I guess. And then in 2015, I went full-time, and I've been there ever since, of course. And again, about 400 episodes. The officially numbered ones are 400 for this show, and nearly 20 years. So I figure that averages out to about 1.6 episodes a month. I always like to say I'm the king of inconsistency in podcasting. So that's how that works. And if you've been with me that whole time, I go 2-3 months sometimes between episodes, and then I put out a bunch of them, and then stop for a while and put out a bunch more. I'm doing exactly, don't do as I do as I say. My suggestion is stay consistent. But I haven't done that. That's okay. But I've had a lot of other podcasts along the way that I've started and stopped. I'm also the king of pod fade. And this isn't even a full list, but I was just, going through my head here. The second show that I started was with a friend of mine, John Martin. We're both ham radio operators, and we're teaching live classes, getting your ham radio license here in the U.S. We did the technician and the general course. We didn't do the extra class. We had plans to, and that one pod faded, but we called it the Ham Radio Pod Class. And that started like in September of 2005, and even got a mention on the Adam Curry's daily source code. So that was the claim to fame there. But near as I can tell, we got probably 700 or 800 people licensed as technician class amateur radio operators here in the U.S., and I don't know how many generals, but definitely, had a pretty decent following on that. Made a couple enemies along the way. There was a couple of other people that were doing cassette tape classes for ham radio, and they weren't real happy with us. We'd go down to Hamvention and get snubbed. I won't mention any names because one of them's still active doing that, and he does good. He sells, I don't think he sells cassettes anymore. And in fact, I think he had a podcast for a while with Leo Laporte. But again, I won't say his name just because no bad comments there. It's a good guy, and he's trained a heck of a lot more hams than I have. But that was the second show that we did. Then I thought, let's do a daily podcast. Oh my gosh, daily is nuts. And I've tried it 4 or 5 times, and it's way too much. No matter how short the content is, a daily podcast. Shout out to James Cridlin doing daily weekdays. We did daily 7 days a week on one called Strange Today. That's where I'd find weird news and talk about that, and anything strange in the news and strange history stuff. I always like history, so you'll see a repeating theme here on some of these shows. But one thing nice about that is I had a few extra guest hosts, so I would write all the scripts. They weren't really word for word scripts, but I'd write scripts and then I'd send them off. So Trucker Tom and I can't think of the other guy that would do the weekend shows for me, but he still does Linux in the Ham Shack. So shout out to you. But had Trucker Tom do a few of them, and Jim Farley, my wife Kathy. So we not always the same host every day, but we made that go a complete year. So I did end up with 365 episodes of that one. Called Strange Today, and I think that one's all gone too. I probably have it all on hard drive somewhere. And then Jim Farley and I, Jim's a ham radio friend of mine and a friend, has a cottage up here, and we break bread quite often. And anyway, Jim and I did one called What's Up With That? And it was just a comedy thing. We just talk about whatever was going on that day when we would record. We did quite a few of those episodes. And every once in a while, I'll get Jim to record with me, and we'll put one of those episodes out on this feed. Again, this feed stayed consistent, not consistent, but it's been the one where you find out everything because I throw stuff into it from time to time. And I did a geek show for a short time called Geek of the North. That didn't last very long. Had that one on a network with Steve Lee. And I don't remember what the network name is, but he's since retired. He's also one of the founders of International Podcast Day, him and his son. And, shout out to you, Steve. Haven't heard from you in a while. Look me up, see what's going on. And those of you that know me know that I'm an aviation geek. So I did another daily, and it lasted a year, called Aviation History Today. So I would read stories that happened back in the day, about aviation. It was just a little short 10-minute daily. I did that for 365 days, so I stayed somewhat consistent with that one. And then after the year, I said, well, why don't we just do aviation history this week? So I did a half-hour show where I would cover the whole week and come up with some pretty cool ones. On April 1st show, I remember those of you that are Star Trek geeks, which I am, know that in 2063, the Dr. Zefram Cochrane discovered or demonstrated warp drive, and that's known as First Contact Day. Well, anyway, I put that in there, and I said that was the great-great-grandson of Todd Cochrane. So, anyway, that was funny. I tried a local one called Traverse City Podcast. That really didn't go very far or very long, but, just sort of did that for a while and, probably did 5 episodes where I thought, this is hard. It's hard work. So I didn't stick with that one. I did stick with this next one for 2 years, and it was a daily, 7 days a week. It was the Traverse City Weather Brief, and all I did was read the weather forecast. Whatever the National Weather Service put out, I just read that, and I could record a couple days ahead of time. And it was about a 1 minute, if that, podcast, and also was a Amazon, what do you call it? I can't say her name or she'll talk to me, but the talking tube lady, it was one of those skills that people could sign up for when they got their daily news brief. They would get the local weather. So did that for a couple of years, and that was fun. But again, even though it was very short and I could record it anywhere, I just, dailies are hard. Again, James, how do you do it? That's crazy. James does, a good 4 minutes, 5 minutes sometimes on Pod News Daily. Check that out if you're into podcast stuff. Then I, tried another one, fast food history. I don't know, I got probably 20 episodes of that, and it was interesting for a while, but again, history related. And then podcast help desk, I did that. I did, thought, wow, I'm talking about podcasting all the time on my main show. Let's try it. Let's try it as a weekly show. So I did that, and that one went for a while. I think I got maybe 150 episodes of that before I kind of ran out of things to talk about. Plus, I was doing Podcast Insider for Blueberry, and we kind of it kind of is the same thing. So kind of bailed on that, and now I'm doing Podcast Insider very weekly, very consistently. I'm not always the host of it, but 9 times out of 10 I am. It's Mackenzie, I, and Todd, and sometimes other people. So that one's going. And I do another show that is still in the we're trying to get our sea legs, but with Mike Wilkerson over at Two Guys Talking Network. We do the Auto History podcast, and we've done a few episodes of it, and kind of regrouping right now to get into a battle rhythm of being consistent. But that one I think will go consistent, and having a co-host helps. So, why? One of the other things I wanted to talk about is, why podcasting? Just do a YouTube channel, do blogging, do actual radio broadcasting. Well, I have done some radio broadcasting. I get on every once in a while with the Morning Zoo show here, Omelette and Friends. Well, that's actually Omelette and Finster now. I haven't been on there since they changed the name and moved stations. But at some point I'll get back on there. And also used to do a show called Folk Air. Got to say that slowly. On the local community station, WNMC, and play folk and bluegrass and roots music for 3 hours or 2 hours. I think it was a 2-hour show every Saturday and Tuesday, and kind of backed off from that, but I might go back to that at some time. So I have been on the radio, but not talk radio. Well, I guess the Morning Zoo shows sort of talk, but anyway. Podcasting is definitely a different sort of medium. Now, there's a push for video now, and as you can tell, me talking into a microphone with headphones on in my office here is not super compelling video. But, it's cool to do once in a while for special occasions, whatever, and, your mileage may vary. Do what you want. That's, no rules. But for me, audio is just special. Again, I'd be listening to these people on talk radio in the middle of the night. You really felt that you got to know them. And that was radio, commercials and all that stuff. Well, in podcasting, you don't have to have commercials. A lot of podcasters choose to monetize with commercials. And I do listen to some shows that have commercials in them. No big deal there. In fact, I've ran commercials before. But just audio, there's a different vibe with audio. You can be doing other things while you're listening to audio. And with podcasting, it's even different than, say, radio. Podcasting is one-on-one. Most people are listening on their earbuds, or they're in their car driving down the road, listening on the Bluetooth to the stereo, or Apple CarPlay, or Android Auto, whatever. And generally, it's not a group activity to listen to a podcast. Now, there are some exceptions to that, I'm sure, but it's a one-on-one experience. And, when you're on earbuds, you're right in their head, or when you're listening to somebody, they're right in your head. If you're listening to me on earbuds right now, I'm right in your head. Watch out. Well, what's all this clutter? But with radio, even though the content can be very similar, with radio, it's one-to-many. With podcasting, it's one-on-one. If you're listening to this, after the fact on a podcast app, chances of you listening to me right now and somebody else listening to me right now are very remote. It's going to be you're listening now, somebody else is listening 10 minutes later, or 3 days later, or 10 years later, whatever. It's just a different sort of vibe. Video has its place. Again, the special occasions. See, I'm looking over at my camera or looking over at my monitor, but, I can wave at you, and, if you're watching on video. And, I could show you screenshots off my computer. I could show you pictures. I could, have some actual interesting video going on. And that's a different vibe altogether, too, like a YouTube channel. YouTube is probably my number one source of video content. I don't watch regular TV all that much. Every once in a while. Live sports is about it. And then, a lot of that you have to pay for cable to get to. Like yesterday, the Michigan State versus Ohio State game. Not that I care for either one of those teams. But if I wanted to watch it, I couldn't do it unless I paid somebody to to watch it, the cable company. And cable prices are ridiculous. Over-the-air broadcast, it wasn't on there. I could stream it, but I'd have to pay for, I think it was Peacock for that one. But they're all different. And podcasting is mostly a free experience. Now, there are exceptions to that, too. There's people that charge for their show or charge for an ad-free version of their show. And, more power to them. But for the most part, free and open podcasting is, it's free and open, just like it says. I don't know. It's just one of those things I fell in love with, and I still am. In my work at Raw Voice, Blueberry, I help a lot of people with the technical side. Not so much the strategy side. If I was the best podcaster in the world, I'd have a heck of a lot more audience than I do. But I can do this, and I can, leave the warts in and all, as Adam once told me. I flubbed up a voice memo I was sending him for his show one time, and I just left it in there, and he said, "Yeah, warts and all." It was kind of cool. Let's see, am I getting anything going on here? I'm just looking through some of the comments. I don't see anything. Of course, I'm not probably looking in the right places. But, it's, podcasting is just different. And, doing 400 episodes. Okay, there's people out there that have done way more episodes than I have in 20 years. I mean, Todd's up there close to 2,000 episodes. Trucker Tom's well into the 2000s. And, he's been at it a little longer than I have. And, for me, it's more therapeutic. If I want to get on and say something, I can get on and say something. Now, I bite my tongue probably more than I ought to because, saying something can have consequences and, not into that. I have opinions. Everybody does. But, the way, if you watch the mainstream news right now, oh my gosh, you would think that we're on the brink of civil war here in the States. And I'm not finding that to be true. Regardless of what they say, people are not as divided as everybody might think if all you do is watch what the news reporters say or the so-called journalists. And, I know people from every walk of life. I know people from every political background or political opinions and all that. And I'm friends with people from every political opinion and all that. And, we don't have to argue about that stuff. Whatever will happen. And just people are not as divided as you would think. The news, in my humble opinion, and this is just my opinion, you can argue with me, and that's great. I welcome comments to the contrary, but, what you see in the news is the worst possible thing. Okay? They do that on purpose. What bleeds leads, or whatever the saying is. Nobody wants the good news, And the news is, man bites dog stories, not the other normal good stuff that, is going on. I went to a dinner last night with family, and, we've got people from D.C. to Light as far as political opinions, and we sat around the table and didn't argue about politics. We weren't at each other's throats. We all love each other, and, it was all great, And that's how the world really is. But if you, watch the nightly scare on the news channels, you're going to have a warped sense of what's really going on. I did work in television for a while, local news. I wasn't on air. I was, behind the scenes pushing buttons and whatnot. But every story that they covered while I was there that I knew something about directly without the news had some material thing wrong with it. And I've got to believe that all of it's that way. I always like to say that, these 24-hour news channels out there, and it doesn't matter which one it is, there's not 24 hours worth of news to cover. Obviously, they repeat stuff, top of the hour for 5 minutes, whatever. But all the rest of it, they got to make stuff up. They have to, because there's just not 24 hours worth of stuff to talk about that's relevant. Or, it used to be the news would tell you what happened, and you got to check and figure out what you think is true. Now they tell you what they want you to think is truth, and you got to figure out whether they're lying or not. So I don't know. Anyway, boy, I got off into a weird thing. But anywho, almost 20 years. I remember, when podcasting, we went to that first podcast conference out in Ontario, California, and it was like a family reunion. You'd go in there and, everybody listened to everybody else, or at least had heard of each other. And you'd walk up to somebody, hey, I'm so-and-so, and, you'd recognize their voice, and you'd know all about them because you'd listened to them, or they knew all about you because they listened to you. Now with, there's some reports, there's 4 million shows out there, maybe more, probably more. But still, great going to these conferences. I went to Podcast Movement here a couple months ago in D.C., and I met a whole bunch of people, and, down to earth, didn't matter what political opinion or what race or sex or any of that stuff. They were just podcasters, and that was great. Age didn't matter. In fact, I'm loving seeing the younger people getting into both listening and producing podcasts, and or videos, or both. There's a little argument amongst the oldsters about what is a podcast, but audiences don't care. If you do a YouTube channel and you call it a podcast, okay, call it a podcast. Nobody really cares. I mean, some of us that like the technical stuff might, but ignore us. Podcast is a podcast is a podcast. And doing content is the whole idea. And in podcasting, there's no real rules. There's some standards if you want it to be distributed in certain places, or if you don't want it distributed in certain places, you can do whatever you want. And that's okay. So I think I'm just going to cut this off at about a half an hour here. I don't want to beleaguer it. A lot of podcasters say, well, I want my podcast to be exactly an hour. Well, if you only have a half hour's worth of stuff to talk about, well, don't stretch it out. Don't waste people's time. People make time to listen to you as a podcaster, and they build you into their schedule. And that's why consistency is important. I'm consistent at about 1.5 episodes a month. That's not consistent. But, that's one of those things that, people forget that, you don't accidentally listen to a podcast in most cases. Yeah, maybe you jump in an Uber and somebody's listening to a podcast, driving the Uber, whatever. I get that. But you make a conscious choice to listen to and or watch a podcast. You don't do it by accident. And so if you're making compelling content or even boring content like I'm doing, people will make time for it. They may not make time for it every week, but they'll make time for it. And they don't accidentally listen to you. So if you ever want to get into podcasting, hit me up. I can help you with that. And otherwise, thanks for hanging out with me. And like I said, I look forward to another 400. Hopefully it won't take me 20 years to do it. Catch me later.